Hello everyone and happy Friday. My name is Nitzahon and I bring you guys a new MTG Top 10 each and every week. This week I'm doing something a little special in that I'm doing a video that relates to content being produced on another YouTube channel, and that channel is called The Card Bazaar. Over on The Card Bazaar you can find a lot of great Magic videos, including a great series called MTG Anthologies that examines the history of each and every set in Magic starting from the beginning, and right now they are on Tempest. The people behind Card Bazaar asked me for help in spreading the word about their channel, and I thought this would be a fun way to do that because we're sort of creating content that complements one another. At some point anyway, I'd like to get around to looking at the best cards from every set in Magic anyway. In this video, I'm going to be focusing, as I always do, on the history of the individual cards that made the list, and if you want to know information about the broader history of Tempest itself, you should check out Card Bazaar's anthology video on the set. You can find a link to the Card Bazaar in the description below. Anyway, this is the type of list where I delve deep into the archives of competitive Magic to find the 10 cards from Tempest that have put up the best numbers. There's one important qualifier I want to mention, and that is that I didn't include cards unless their first printing was in Tempest. So reprints of cards that happen to be in Tempest do not count. So that means cards like Dark Ritual and Counterspell are exempt from this list, as they were not printed for the first time in Tempest. Anyway, before we get to the list, a quick reminder of how I come up with the score and rankings for each of these cards. Cards receive points depending on how many Grand Prix or Pro Tour Top 8s they received, with a Pro Tour Top 8 worth twice as much as a Grand Prix Top 8. While they are not technically Pro Tours, I've also begun including Top 8s in the annual Vintage Championships and Legacy Championships as a Pro Tour Top 8, as it is the highest level of competition in either of these formats, and if we base scores solely on Grand Prix and Pro Tours, Vintage would be completely left out, and that didn't seem fair. Alongside each of the cards, you will also see the breakdown of these points and some other relevant information about the card, such as what format it has seen success in. Now, let's take a look at the number 10 card on this list. At number 10 with 26 points, we have Diabolic Edict. You've heard of an Edict effect before. They're usually around somewhere in most standard formats, with Foul Tongue Invocation being the most recent example to see play in Standard. Well, we get the term Edict from this card. Edict effects are nice because they allow you to get around obnoxious things like Protection, Shroud, and Hexproof. They do have a downside, of course, of not letting you choose which creature to kill, but this is one of the few Edict effects that is actually instant speed, making it much more powerful. Since you can, in response to your opponent putting a new creature on the stack, cast the Edict to make them lose the one they have in play. Diabolic Edict first saw play in a mono-black mid-range deck at Worlds in 1999, where it got 2 top 8s. Surprisingly, it never really saw play in Standard again, but it very quickly began seeing play in extended control decks, most famously in the oppressive Psychotog deck of the early 2000s. With extended a dead format, Diabolic Edict now sees the most play in Legacy, where it has shown up in a variety of decks, including Delver and Shardless Bug. It has a top 8 as recently as December of 2016 in a Shardless Bug deck, so even after all these years, the original Edict is still building on its resume. At number 9, we have Parish. We don't really see cards that hose other colors that are quite this powerful anymore. Khans Block gave us a solid cycle, but nothing quite like Parish. In the old days, printing cards that were excellent sideboard cards that were powerful against only one color was pretty commonplace, and Parish was one of those. It is an interesting card because it really didn't see much play in the Standard format at the time, only picking up a couple of Pro Tour Top 8s. That's probably because it was a format dominated by various blue and black decks, so the need for a card that really punished players playing green just wasn't there. However, people started playing it in the extended format pretty quickly. It was a format where Verdant Force at the time, a card that narrowly missed making this top 10 by the way, was not an uncommon win condition, and Parish was great because it dealt with the Force and the Saprolings all in one. Oath of Druids was also a tier 1 deck in that extended, and it ran green creatures as part of its combo engine. Where it has seen the most play, though, is in Legacy, a format where there was a tier 1 Elves deck for a very long time, and obviously Parish was the kind of card that could just end games against an army of Elves. While Parish hasn't seen a lot of play lately, if Elves ever make a big comeback in Legacy, you can bet it will start showing up again. At number 8, with 34 points, I have Lotus Pedal. Fast mana is always good, and this one references one of the most busted cards in the history of Magic, Black Lotus. Just a petal of the Lotus, this one only provides you with 1 mana of any color instead of 3. Still, that was good enough for this to see play in lots of places. Interestingly enough, it didn't see play at all when it was in Standard. This was a world with lots of broken cards in it, like Dark Ritual and Gaia's Cradle, so there were just better ways to get fast mana. It first showed up in Extended, picking up 2 Pro Tour Top 8s and 2 Grand Prix Top 8s between 1998 and 1999. That didn't do much for a very long time, until people decided it would be pretty good in Legacy around 2009, and it has seen play there ever since, especially in Storm decks, where the fact that you can cast this for free is extra meaningful because it adds to your Storm count, but it also shows up in a variety of other decks, like Sneak and Show and Reanimator. It has picked up a Legacy top 8 as recently as January of 2017 at Grand Prix Louisville, so it has continued to be something of a Legacy staple. It even sees a bit of play in Vintage, managing a top 8 at the 2013 Vintage Championship in a Vintage Storm deck, so it should continue to build its resume as time goes on. At number 7, we have Choke, the other color hosing card on this list that is a good example of the kind of hate cards that used to be printed. In the standard of its time, Choke saw some play as a way of really hurting blue control decks, and that has basically been Choke's role ever since. It has performed that role in both Extended and Legacy. It had the good fortune of also being reprinted in 8th edition, meaning that it is legal in Modern as well. Unlike many of the cards on this list, most of the other cards on this list aren't in Modern, is what I mean to say. In Modern, it has, in the past, been a key sideboard card against both Merfolk and Delver, and it still continues to see some play there. At number 6, we have one of the best lands of all time, but not the only land on this list that's incredibly powerful. But for now, we're going to talk about Ancient Tomb. Ancient Tomb gives you 2 mana on only 1 land, with the minor downside of also doing 2 damage to you. This is a very powerful effect because it ramps you so effectively, while also not taking up a real slot in your deck like lots of other ramp cards do. It's just a land. Because of its power, Ancient Tomb has seen a lot of play. When it was in Standard, it was a big part of the mono-red land destruction deck of the time, as it let you cast Stone Rain on turn 2 and Wildfire on turn 5. Back in the days of Extended, it was especially prominent in artifact-based deck, perhaps most famously Tinker decks. In 2003, it got 7 top 8s at Pro Tour New Orleans. After that, it was quickly banned out of Extended because of its ubiquity and power. For several years, it didn't do much, but it began to see play more frequently ever since 2009 in Legacy and Vintage, and it is pretty close to being a staple in the latter, helping set up fast mana for combos like Sneak and Show and Painter's Servant. At number 5, we have the first, and believe it or not, only creature to appear on this list. In general, more recent creatures are more powerful than the older ones, and old lands and non-creature spells are more powerful, so it makes sense for there to be only one creature cracking this top 10. The one creature we do have was one of the best aggro creatures of his time, believe it or not, and that is Mog Fanatic. He doesn't look like anything special for us today. A 1-mana 1/1 who can sacrifice himself to do 1 damage to something is fine, but certainly not amazing. It may not even see play in Standard. But Magic's rules were different at the time, and in fact they were different for a very long time, and combat damage at the time actually used the stack. So it was possible that you could, in combat, block with a Mog Fanatic, or have a Mog Fanatic block, and at this time you could say, in response to combat damage going on the stack, I sacrifice my Mog Fanatic. This meant the Fanatic could do 2 damage, 1 from his power and 1 from his ability. This meant you can enable 2-for-1s with this 1-drop or take down a 2-toughness creature with him. Pretty good deal for 1 mana. He was part of a few of the more prominent aggro decks in the early history of Magic, including Red Deck Wins and Sly when he was in Standard. He was also frequently featured in burn decks. Eventually, with the release of Onslaught Block in 2003, his creature type also became an asset. Goblins became a viable deck in both Extended and Legacy, and the Fanatic began racking up top 8s in various iterations of the Goblin deck, in addition to his usual appearances in Red Deck Wins lists. When the rules change came about in 2011, though, Mog Fanatic was badly hampered and stopped seeing play anywhere. As such, he will probably lose ground on this list to cards behind him that are still seeing play today. At number 4, we have Cursed Scroll. This is a card that, believe it or not, was a key card in aggro decks back in the day, just like Mog Fanatic was. Today it looks woefully inefficient and a little too narrow to be good, but it worked in Magic's days gone by. Aggro decks at the time, as they basically do today as well, focused on emptying their hands as quickly as possible, and as this meant they had done a lot of damage to the opponent the quicker they could empty their hand and play creatures and spells. Cursed Scroll, meanwhile, functioned as a way to get the last few damage in if your opponent stabilized. Once you're in top deck mode, this provides some sweet value of paying 3 every turn to do 2 damage to anything, as if you only have 1 card in your hand, obviously your opponent will always choose the one you name. In Standard, Cursed Scroll saw play primarily in aggro decks like Sly, White Weenie, Red Deck Wins, and Stompy. In Legacy, it mostly did the same thing, though it did make some appearances in less aggressive decks like Countertop. In Extended, most aggressive decks played it while they could, including Goblins, Red Deck Wins, Sly, and White Weenie. Over time, though, there were better ways to get reach. Cards like Grim Lavamancer filled this role much more efficiently, and Cursed Scroll fell out of favor. But it was once an aggro deck staple across multiple formats, and on the strength of those appearances between 1998 and 2003, and a brief appearance in 2007, it manages to come in at 4th on this list. Now we go from a couple of cards that were commonly found in aggressive decks in Magic's past to a card that was more frequently found in combo and control decks. Unlike most cards that have a similar effect, Intuition didn't require you to get cards with different names, so it often amounts to an instant speed tutor that just gets stronger if you have some graveyard synergies. In block, it was in decks that utilized Living Death because Intuition could be used to just throw your reanimation targets into your graveyard while also getting you another card into your hand. Interestingly, this card never saw play in the Standard of its day, but it found a home in Extended, most notably in the Psychotog decks that could use everything that Intuition did to help fuel Psychotog, because you would throw a bunch of cards in the graveyard while also getting whatever card you really needed from your deck. However, Intuition has done the most work in Legacy, where it still sees play in Sneak and Show decks, as it could guarantee, and can guarantee, that you are able to cheat one of your big creatures into play on your next turn because you just searched for one of them. At number 2, we have the second land to make this list, Reflecting Pool. Like Choke, Reflecting Pool benefits a little bit from having been reprinted, in this case in Lorwyn, meaning that it had both another shot at Standard and Block, and it is also legal in Modern. The pool makes your mana base a lot better, since it basically comes into play as a copy of whatever your best land is, and because it fits into so many different decks looking for better mana, it has managed 74 points in the number 2 spot on this list. It got its first Pro Tour Top 8 all the way back in 1998 in Los Angeles, which was a Tempest block-constructed Pro Tour. It didn't see a whole lot of play on its first roll through Standard, only picking up a Top 8 at Worlds in 1998. However, it very quickly saw play in Extended, becoming one of the lands that appeared in most multicolor decks. It was much more prolific on its second run through Block and Standard, after being reprinted in Lorwyn. This is in part because it was printed alongside the Vivid lands, which allowed Reflecting Pool to frequently add mana of any color. In Lorwyn Block Constructed, Reflecting Pool picked up 11 of its 32 total Grand Prix Top 8s, appearing in the Abzan-colored Doron Siege Tower deck most famously, but also making appearances in Blue-Black Fairies and in Red-White Elementals. It was far more productive on its second run through Standard too, where it appeared in decks like Revelark, the standard version of Doron decks, Black-White tokens, and Fairies. While in Standard this second time, Reflecting Pool picked up 11 of its 21 Pro Tour Top 8s and 17 of its 32 Grand Prix Top 8s. It managed to amass more than one Top 8 at every single event of that Standard season, indicating just how important of a card it was for mana bases at the time. It continued to enjoy success in Extended after it rotated out of Standard, frequently showing up in 5-color control decks and other decks with a need for high mana efficiency. However, Extended eventually came to an end in 2011, and Reflecting Pool has never returned to play at the premier level. Now let's see what card we have at number 1. It is a card that is famous for being incredibly expensive despite originally being an uncommon, and a card that is a staple across many formats, with more than double the score of any other card on this list, and that card is Wasteland. Originally printed as a fixed form of Strip Mine, only being able to destroy non-basic lands instead of any land the way Strip Mine can, Wasteland has proved to be almost as powerful. In most formats, non-basic lands make up a huge chunk of mana bases, and having the ability to destroy them is incredibly powerful, as it not only sets the opponent back on mana, but sometimes it takes away one of their colors. People knew Wasteland was good almost immediately, and it showed up in 2 different aggro decks that top-8'd a Tempest Block Pro Tour in 1998, and it has never really stopped seeing play across all formats it is legal in ever since. In Standard, it was a strong card as well, showing up, again, in primarily aggressive deck lists. In the days of Extended, it also saw play in a ton of decks, including combo decks like Oath of Druids, aggro decks like Red Deck Wins, and control decks like Bant Control. There wasn't really a good reason not to be running the Wasteland in most decks. Today, it is still played in Legacy, and it's basically a staple there. At the most recent Legacy Grand Prix, for example, 5 of the top 8 decks ran Wasteland. This is a pretty standard appearance for the card in Legacy. Wasteland even sees play in Vintage, despite the fact that the strictly better Strip Mine is playable there, but that's because Strip Mine is restricted, so Wasteland sort of serves as additional copies of Strip Mine. Well, that does it for this week's MTG Top 10. I want to remind you that if you want to learn more about Tempest and other card sets, check out the YouTube channel The Card Bazaar, especially their anthology series, which you can find in the description. Also, if you want to see some more of my top 10s, I occasionally contribute them to EtherHub, a Magic the Gathering channel where several MTG YouTubers, including me, work together on a lot of exciting content. I also post draft videos there regularly. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. Let me know any suggestions you have for future top 10s in the comments, and if you want to make sure you catch future editions of MTG Top 10 and the other content that I create, click subscribe. Also, my content is in part sponsored by 5colorcombo.com, a great website for anyone who loves Magic. You can find lots of content there, as well as an app that lets you practice drafting the latest formats, and a store. In that store, you can use my discount code NEETZAHONE5 to get a 5% discount. Thanks for watching.